you, Mike. Welcome to YouTube on Main Street. Hashtag YouTube Sundance. So if you're on Google Plus or Twitter or any other social network, YouTube Sundance is the hashtag. I want to thank you guys for coming. We're excited to be here. You know, I think for YouTube, it's an opportunity to really embrace the community and really see the kind of work that you guys are all doing and get to know you a little bit, hear about what you're passionate about, what stories you're telling, what great films you're working on, and share with you some of the things that we're working on the platform as well. You know, there's over 1 billion people coming to YouTube every month. I'm sure most of you are in that group. I'm in that group. And there's really an engaged audience that's looking for great stories. And I think probably everybody in this room is trying to be a part of telling great stories. So I encourage you to get to meet some of the folks that are in the room. You know, come back throughout the week. We'll be here. We've got an amazing panel tonight. After the panel, Young Guru is going to do a DJ set, so don't leave. The panel tonight is about something that I'm particularly passionate about that intersection between music and film. I had an experience on Saturday, and probably some of you guys can identify with this, where I had to watch 20 Feet from Stardom again because my dogs haven't seen it, so I had to get them together. A little pug named Olive and a little mug named Oscar, and we watched 20 Feet from Stardom. And after that film was over, I had to go on YouTube. I had to watch every clip about Mary Clayton I could find. I had to watch every clip about Darlene Love. And then somehow I got in the rabbit hole. I ended up watching the Harry Nilsson documentary. Then I went back on YouTube and ended up watching the Sound City documentary, and went on YouTube again and was watching everything about Dave Grohl. And then it was like 3:30 in the morning on Sunday, and everybody I'm sure has been there. So I think there's just something so dynamic about the way music and film can connect, and they both have a hook that if that song hooks you, that film hooks you, you just can't get it out of your brain and you can't leave it. And it just stimulates you and inspires you to go and look and search and discover other creative work. So we're excited to have this panel. We've got an amazing group, and we're really happy that Kathryn and Craig and Keegan are here. But right now I'm going to introduce our moderator, who is somebody that has done some unbelievable work with Jay-Z, Alicia Keys. He's an engineer, a producer. There's a great video on YouTube, YouTube Sundance, hashtag, don't forget. Great video of Young Guru wearing the Google Glass, but really a visionary thinker and a guy that's got his finger on the pulse, and we're so pleased to have him here. So let's welcome Young Guru. Go back around this way.
No problem. Wow, super loud. Okay. It's kind of tough when you can't do the microphones and be talented at the same time.
This is a super cool opportunity for me, just because I'm always in the music world, and to talk about something that has to do with the marriage of music and film is very interesting for me. And as much as I would love to have my personal questions, I'm going to try to ask as many questions that help you guys out from these guys. So I won't take up all the time asking my own personal questions, right? But we have a great panel today, and hopefully, especially when we open up for question and answer, I hope you guys can get as many questions out as possible, and just try to take as much information from this as you can. And I guess the whole point is to really apply it to what you're doing, right? This whole thing is about creativity, and us as artists finding the best ways in this new world to display our art. So that's sort of what we're going to talk about today. But enough about me and why I'm here. I think it's time that we should really introduce our panelists. So first up, we have Craig. And Craig, please don't kill me if I kill your last name. Craig Wedren, is that right? That was great. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, Craig Wedren is an acclaimed songwriter and singer who began his career fronting the punk pioneers, Shudder to Think. He's made a name for himself in the traditional world of rock and pop, and he's also sought after in television and music film. He's done a variety of scoring, including Wanderlust, Role Models, The School of Rock, Wet Hot America Summer, and TV shows such as Hum. Please give it up for Craig.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for the pronunciation. You're the first.
I was trying hard. My name is Jamil, my real name is Jamil, and
so you know what it feels like.
I know what it feels like. I'm Guy Mel, I'm Gimel, I was all those things throughout high school, so.
That's your Hebrew name, Gimel.
Yeah, I understand how people get upset, but I tried my best. Secondly, we have Kathryn Bostic. She's a composer, producer, a singer, a prolific songwriter. She has written for TV, film, and theater. She's a recipient of several awards, especially the Sundance Fellowship for Theater Films. I can't even read. For feature film scoring. She's won the Fellowship for Documentary Scoring, and a bevy of other things that we'll get into. But I love the title of the new thing that you worked on. She, in 2014, worked on Dear White People. I absolutely love that title. Incredible title. But we'll get into everything that you've done a little bit later. Thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, we have Keegan DeWitt. Yes, please give it up for him. He scored many films, including the Sundance 2013 selections, This Is Martin Boner, Life According to Sam, as well as the Academy Award-winning short documentary, Innocent. Please give it up for him as well. So I guess I'll start with Craig, and we'll do the basics, just so everyone can have a background. Could you kind of explain to us how you got into music and sort of how that translated into you working in film?
I was obsessed with music from a very, very young age,
Okay.
as probably we all were. When I got my first little cassette 4-track machine in 10th grade,
Okay.
it turns out the music that I was making prank phone calls and using little sampler foot stomp boxes and
Okay.
early synthesizers.
Do you mind telling us how old you are?
44.
Okay, great.
Um,
I definitely wasn't going to do that, Kathryn.
So it turns out, in retrospect, what I was making was kind of ambient, very filmic music. I started playing in bands when I was about 13.
Okay.
Took me all the way till I was about 30 years old and tired of playing in bands. My band was called Shudder to Think throughout my 20s. We were all film obsessed. And a lot of my friends, a lot of our friends from college were in the film school at NYU. And I was sort of the music guy because I was in a band and we had records. And so whenever somebody had a student film, they would come to me. And maybe just below music obsession was film buffery. I was always obsessed with movies. So it was a very, very natural combination. Once my friends started making their own films, it just became a fit. And fortunately coincided with getting really tired of touring, making records, and being on the road. So it was good.
Okay, great. I think I should ask everyone that question because you may get tired, like I do, of always saying where you come from. But I think it helps people that are either just starting out or in that same situation. So to not be redundant, sort of where did you start and where did the mixture between music and film sort of come in for you?
Well, just to agree with what was just said, I started very early. My mother was a classical pianist and composer, so I grew up listening to everything from her. She would just, the piano was her sanctuary, and she would just marinate on Tchaikovsky and Chopin, but she also played standards, jazz standards, by Ellington and Count Basie and whatnot. So I grew up listening to that, and I came in fact, she was teaching a piano lesson when she went into labor with me. So I think it was already the hands of destiny were on, and so I've been writing music. I mean, I just came in that way, and I've always appreciated the art of storytelling, whether it's in a song, whether it's in someone's journal, or just conversation. I've always really appreciated the wide range of events and experiences that people have, and I've always been able to hear sonically like how that resonates with me. So as I got older, I'm also a singer-songwriter and did a lot of touring with different people and got to see, just in the live sense, how these stories would be translated on stage with an audience and that kind of synergy. But what really began to intrigue me was collaborating with choreographers and playwrights in particular. So I started writing music for theater when I was in college, and I also started working with different choreographers. And then when I was living in New York, I was speaking with a friend of mine who introduced me to a great documentary filmmaker, Stanley Nelson, and I worked with him on his documentary, Marcus Garvey, and that's kind of how I got started in the film scoring end of things, which is an incredible, incredible wide range and diverse field of storytelling.
Wow, okay. So Keegan, can we ask that same question?
Yeah, that's fine. I grew up at a really loud.
I'm on stage, so you can't blame me for the
Now
sound.
I know that's so serious. I mean, like, you know, with the proximity of the mic, you know, I work that, right? Anyway, I went to fine arts high school and I wanted to make films. And I played music, just kind of on the side.
Okay.
In a lot of different bands. And I wanted to either make films or be a poet. And I realized as I started to begin scoring films that a lot of matching music to films is like poetry. It's where you're kind of starting to hint at these really, really small, minuscule things.
Right.
And for me, growing up, I was always really excited about the idea of restraint. Like when I first discovered Miles Davis, I remember it was a really big moment for me to realize that it was essentially somebody who was creating music that was getting recognized exclusively for what he's not playing, which is what he is playing. And for me, that started to introduce a world where I could make music for films in that exact same way. Obviously, not the same way like this Miles Davis, but you know what I mean, that same kind of goal, saying like, how can I try and just give little sparks against what's happening on the screen to be able to create a big ripple of resonance. So that was a really exciting thing for me. And then, you know, the simple version of that is how I got started is I had a really good friend. Me and my best friend in high school, who was Aaron Katz, started making movies together, and I was the only one he knew who made music, and so I just kind of got started. You know, I didn't take myself seriously, and then I did like 3 more, and I was like, hey, we should start taking myself seriously.
Wow.
You know, so that's when I started pivoting into that. So it's always a hard question for me to answer whenever anyone says explicitly, how did you get started? Because I wish that there was like advice that could say, oh, well, you just go here, and you meet these people. But the biggest thing is, you know, building relationships with creative people, and that goes back to the idea of then learning how to kind of like do that dance with them, where you know when to lay back and when to let them move you a lot of work, and then you know when to kind of lean forward and help them achieve things that maybe they're not being able to achieve in that certain moment.
Okay. There's a lot of great points that you hit on, and I want to come back to a couple of them, but I guess the last point that you said is something that I sort of want to give to the audience as to at what point did you know? Because I get a lot of questions of when did you become a professional? Because again, this is not something in our profession where there's a distinct moment where it's like, okay, I got this job and now I'm a professional this or that. So at what point did you know I can exist and feed myself and, you know, consider this my career versus I'm just a musician or I'm just someone that's trying? What was that point for you?
I think that there was a couple moments early on, especially with Aaron's films and a couple other things, where I laid back in moments and underplayed in terms of scoring something, and I knew that it really pleased me. Like I would watch it back and back, and be like, this is really nice.
Okay.
In like the elegance of not overplaying it, and then having a couple people say that back to you. It's like anything else. Like I feel like so much of succeeding at anything is having the mentorship of people, whether they be equals or people older than you, saying like, I acknowledge what you're doing, and that you did something there. And I think that having a couple people step forward and say, acknowledge that in me, made me then take myself that much more, or take the work that I was doing.
To ask a very practical question, did you have another job at this point? Because I ask very real questions, right? It's things that students or people that are involved in music and film always want to ask.
I'm so glad that you asked that. I hate it when you read like a Vogue article and you're like, they're sort of like a DJ, but they design clothes. And I'm like, well, what the F do they do?
Right.
Or what does their dad do? Is that the question that I should be asking? But yeah, I think that when people started to write and say, hey, I saw this film that you scored, and I want to work with you because of that film, rather than, hey, I've got a film and it's filled with a bunch of music that I can't afford. Do you want to try and make an affordable version of that music?
Right.
You know, that was a moment when I started to go, okay, this is I can really do that. And then a lot of, I think, creating a sustainable career from there on is just entrenching yourself and saying, I'm not going to be a music house. I'm going to be an individual person who makes music that speaks uniquely about who I am and how I communicate with film. Because there's just an S-load of... I'm censoring myself. I don't know if this is going somewhere, but I'll keep doing it. We are in Utah.
I'm definitely censoring myself as well.
Sorry. But anyways, you know, that helps a lot.
Okay. Craig, I guess I would ask you that same question. At what were you sort of doing up until that point where you considered yourself a professional?
I considered myself a professional from about age 13.
Okay.
You know, when I got a microphone for my bar mitzvah, right? And made a little bit of money playing like Battle of the Bands or whatever.
Okay.
But I still don't feel like a professional.
Wow.
Things are going great.
Okay.
But I don't know. What the hell am I doing? Was that the last? Was that the last piece of music that I'm ever going to make?
Right.
It might be. I don't know.
I'm going to ask you this question to touch on something that Keegan said, and then I'm going to bring Kathryn in on it. As a musician, and I guess coming from my background, as a musician who can just make music and freely make, let's say, an album, he touched on something about, is that my phone? I'm so sorry. He touched on something about restraint, which I think is really great. And something that I noticed when I first got to making music for movies is that I come from a background where if the artist wants to make a 5-10 minute record, you know, you're allowed to do that. And then someone automatically throws me into this situation where they're like, oh, we love your music, but we need this to happen in 30 seconds. You know, was that a huge change for you, coming from a band situation where you're just making music the way you want to?
It was a relief, because after having worked strictly in verse, chorus, song format for so many years, it becomes a straitjacket.
Okay.
There's so many... What I like about film scoring is the combination of the scene and the director, ideally, gives you very peculiar, unique parameters for the structure of any given piece of music that you're going to write. And usually it has to sit in the background, speaking of restraint.
Yes.
It needs to support what's going on. It almost needs to be invisible music. So in a way, you really do get to try out a lot of things that you would never allow yourself if you were working on a song that you knew everybody was going to be sort of listening to directly in the foreground.
Okay.
So that was liberating to me.
Okay. Do you find that tough for other musicians, though?
I think it's hard for most people in bands to make the switch to film scoring precisely because of that. Because you're used to serving yourself.
Yes.
And oftentimes making records is sort of an FU to the world. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do. This is what I think. Listen to me.
Right.
And when you're in a movie situation, it's the opposite of that.
Yes.
You're getting very specific, very subtle assignments, and you got to take a back seat.
Yes. Kathryn, I guess I would throw that over to you. Do you find that constricting or freeing to be able to make music that has to be tied to something else versus being able to be free to just make a musical composition?
You know, it's interesting because I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because I have such an appreciation for the art of collaboration. It's one of the reasons why I love film scoring. You're working with a director's vision, and it's really powerful to be a part of that process. And it's at times a very specific process that they have in mind, and sometimes they defer to you. But I do like that kind of collaboration. And then there are times when I just want to be free and do my own thing. So I think you have to recognize what instance are you in at that time. I mean, if you want to do your own thing, because I really believe that artistic voice, you know, especially as you become more self-aware in some ways, you want to give a voice to it. So then do that. But this is not the place per se. You know, when you're film scoring, you are really brought on to serve that film as part of that storytelling ingredient. So I would say for me that the the ability to collaborate and at the same time still bring things that are fresh, that are innovative, that reflect why you were asked to be a part of the team.
That's the part, and not to cut you off, and I want to extend that question to you and Keegan as well.
Yeah.
I guess I would say that one of the questions that I get from a lot of my students as an engineer is they say, well, Guru, you know, you've put your signature on a lot of records. And I tell them that I had to go through a lot of producers who I had to make the record sound the way that they wanted it to sound before I got the opportunity to even showcase to people the way I wanted it to sound.
Right.
So a lot of the times my students are battling getting the job versus expressing their own self. So how would you advise someone to navigate that world of not trying to totally conform to what someone else is doing, but also put themselves in it to say, okay, well, if this is going to be my reel to show to people, I don't want someone to look at a film and see my name on it, but the ideas all came from some director and I wanted to do something totally different, but now my name is on this and this will represent me. How do they navigate that?
That's a really good question. I mean, no, really, because you know, especially with a lot of directors who will tempt the film with temp music and become very, very tied in to that. That's the standard. That genre, the timing, the tempo, the colors, all of that, that's just what they have become used to listening to. And you want to try to bring in something innovative. And I mean, you know, there's some opportunities where that is more readily apparent than others. I think you just have to, you know, each situation is different. I'm getting ready to start a project with a first-time filmmaker, and he's deferring a lot to me so far. We'll see. But I think, again, if you have an individual approach to what your thing is, then you need to figure out a way to create that moment for you, and the process of collaborating might allow you to do some of that, but you'll see. You'll see just by that synergy of that experience. And there's a lot of new things that I come away with in working with these directors and producers. There's a lot of new ideas that I was like, oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that as a texture. And then I might put that in my thing. So, you know, you have to really check your ego. You have to check a lot of things and just try to be present and show up for how's the film going to get made that I can still have my vibe in there, but I still want to make it work for the director's vision.
I do think, speaking to that if you're a composer, or if you're an adult musician pretty much of any stripe, you probably love all kinds of music. So when a music's temped with this song or that pre-existing score, you can find your own personal way into it. There's a way to do it.
Okay.
If you can fall in love with it. And then I think so in a way, for me anyway, rather than resisting the temp love situation that a lot of directors have, I'm like, okay, you love this Talking Head song, so do I. If I don't, I'm gonna fall in love with it.
Okay.
And then I fall in love with, you know, it's like it's like playing a character. It's like acting. You put on a mask, you're not being yourself, but you somehow communicate something essential and unique that only you can bring to the table in the best of all possible situations. It doesn't always work out that way, but I think it can. And that's the little video game of it.
Okay.
You know, that's the maze, is to find out a way to plug yourself into whatever shape you're being asked to take.
Okay. So,
I mean, I always try and trick people into, like, I'll be talking to a filmmaker and they say, okay, so we're about to shoot next week, and then we want to bring you in like 3 months from now, and I'll go, well, okay, let me just start now. Let me just start giving you music now.
okay.
Because not only does it get them excited about that world and already kind of get their brain churning in terms of like imagining scenes with your music, but it also makes it so like nobody loves anything more than their own idea a lot of the time.
Right.
That's a little bit of a cynical way to put it, but like it's a nice way of like you've instantly shared culpability on the ideas,
Yes.
you know, and so you're kind of like
already there with the director, and you guys are both kind of already working with this music. Rather, like, I always look at it as like, as soon as you can get in there and be like, how about this? Before we even sign a contract, let me just send you some music that I think that you might like, that I have.
Okay.
You know, just to start already trying to like cut that off at the pass on that stuff. Because I feel like last year, this is really true, for at least for me. Last year at the BMI roundtable, Abel Korzeniowski was like, I feel like temp music and people's attachment to temp music deprives so many great directors of really great collaborations with equally great composers. I also agree that it's not that big of a deal and you should just get over it and figure out how to deal with it, like you guys said. But, you know, I try and like constructively just get in there early and often and engage them in the stuff, and when I send them notes, tell them exactly what's going on so that they can start like talking about instruments and getting excited about specific things. And then one last thing that I would just say is usually, and this is only just interesting to me because I've started to realize it more and more as I watch things that get sent to me, is usually if I know that I'm going to really fall in love with a project, I'll watch it the first time and be like, this does not need score. And I'll be like, I don't need, it's like a humbling thing where you'll like sit there and watch it and be like, I don't even know how to really approach this. I feel like I don't want to, you know, mess it up at all. And that's always an exciting moment for me when I can sit and watch a 90-minute movie that someone sent me on Vimeo at like, you know, 12:30 in the morning after my kid's gone to sleep and still be like, that's amazing. I don't want to score that. That's perfect, you know?
Okay. Is there any opportunity, or should I say not even opportunity, a situation? I'm very big on giving real-world situations. Again, I don't like the interviews where we're just talking, you know, in the air. Have there ever been any projects that you've taken on, and I guess this is for everyone, just for work purposes, like where you watched the film and you were like, this is average. No matter how much shining I'm going to do, I'll use my own experience. I've listened to songs and I said, no matter how much I do on this song, it's never going to be a hit. Yeah. This guy's not really that good, but they want to pay me $5,000 for this mix, and I'm 22 years old and I have a child.
Yeah. I think it's important to know where you are in your career.
Okay.
I mean, there was like a part in my career early on when I was like, I need to work.
Right. I want to give that balance
like,
to the
I need
audience
to grow
of how much
as a
is this about work and how much is it about, you know, sometimes as artists we want to say, okay, I only want to pick, everyone would love to do, you know, these Scorsese films. Yeah. Like we would love that. But in reality, you know, we have to work and we have to feed children and we have to exist and pay rent. So how much of it is the balance of I want to do my art and how much of it is I'm paying my bills?
I really appreciate that about composing, and that nobody's going through John Williams' Spotify being like, what is this movie? What is this? It's a horrible movie. It's like, you know, I think that it's like any grown-up in the world, you have to make trade-offs in terms of certain projects that you do, and you have to realize that sometimes you'll do projects that you don't totally love artistically, but those have a very real currency to them, which is they afford you the opportunity to go and do that movie that's going to go to Sundance that is amazing with an amazing group of people, and they can only pay you $500 to do it. Right. You know what I mean? And that's like, it's a trade game, you know? So.
Is there some type of gauge? I have this traditional thing that I say vibe over money. It's one of my statements that if it just completely feels wrong, I just won't do it no matter what the amount of money is. But there are times when I'm like, okay, well, my daughter's going to college and, you know, I need to pay this bill. So I'll do a song that I know is not necessarily one of my favorites. Are there any gauges, I guess I should say, or is there a point where you feel like the artist is taking away from themselves, where later on when you're looking at your reel, you were like, oh, I shouldn't have really did that one?
I think it's only, I think it's fine once in a while. And I think it's easy to stop noticing if you have a success with something that you don't love, and it's followed by multiple other successes of things that you don't love, you can be a long way down that pipe before you realize that you're kind of stuck in that pipe. Okay. So I think it's just important to, and I think it's fine. You know, sometimes I take a job because there are people who I want to work with. Okay. Or where there are people who I think I might want to work with in the future on something else. Sometimes I'll take a job because of the money. I always try and take a combination of loving it, getting paid well, and working with people who I love. Sometimes all three, you know, work on the slot machine. Sometimes it doesn't. But I just think it's important to just check yourself, to just check your list every day in the mirror and make sure that you haven't kind of forgotten and gone numb, which I think can happen.
Okay.
And I think I have met huge composers who are very unhappy,
Yes.
wildly
Yes.
successful.
Yeah.
You know, it's a spectrum. You don't have to be miserable. You can do some jobs for this reason and some jobs for that reason, and it keeps you very flexible. And I think that's good.
I wanted to save this question a little bit later, but I think you went into it a little bit. What is this new definition of success? And I think in this new time that we're living in, and we'll get into this a little bit later about how, the job has changed over the years, but what do you see as that success? Because when I ask a lot of my students nowadays who come to me and they say, well, I want your career. I want to make the money you made. I want to win the Grammys that you won and all. And I'm like, well, the music business sort of isn't like that anymore. You're kind of not going to have this multi-platinum album, but that doesn't mean you're not successful, as an artist. So what sort of is your definition of success? Where would you feel comfortable in saying, I'm successful in doing the type of work that you're doing? And that's an open question to everyone. I think it's important too. I'm going to shut up, guys. It's hard for me to be a moderator, but I think it's important for the people in the room because the definition has changed in terms of putting out a movie or even scoring certain movies that will get attention. Doesn't have to be the super huge blockbuster Hollywood movie, as we all know at this point. But how do we gauge that success? I guess is my question. I know, tough question.
I don't. It change. I mean, doesn't it change all the time?
It does for me, yes.
I think it's when also, at least for me, I don't know about success, but there's a lot of composers that I look at and I really guide by, like people like Cliff Martinez or Dario Marinelli, these people who are doing things on a really large scale, but they're doing them in ways where people like us are going, what the hell is that instrument that he's playing? You know what I mean? Or I'm picking up that magazine in the hair salon being like, how did he do that? I have no idea how he did that. So that's an exciting thing. I mean, and I also think, this is kind of like a B question of your other question, which is you hope that you can balance enough money in good, subtle ways to be able to continue to just make as much lasting, substantive work as possible, and somewhere along the way continue to develop and grow as a composer, like you said. Be able to surprise yourself. I always love it when I get swamped with especially right before Sundance, if you're trying to film, the last 2 years I've had 2 films to finish in 3 weeks at the same time, and it's I always love it when 3 months later you go back and you listen and you're like, wow, that's really cool.
And I think for me, success, it like you said, there's different gradations of it. It changes. And I'm just so happy to be, getting paid to write music. That for me is just, wow. I have to, whenever I start to get a little cranky, I have to remind myself, people are paying you for your creativity. And that is very humbling. And I think humility in and of itself is an incredible, powerful ingredient to success, because you're open to things that you normally might obstruct. And I think that there are a variety of reasons why I might do a film, as you mentioned so beautifully earlier. And I think also, I think for me, success is really, it's just about being happy on a certain level, being at peace with what I'm doing on my day-to-day, and not always, I always have to remind myself not to fast forward so much. Where is this going, and what is this going to be, and how am I going to get from A to B? Because life, it's just not like that. It's not 1 + 1 is 2, and if I do this, and now I have my degree, and now I have this. It is a very organic, relationship-driven experience. That's what life is, no matter how much of a hermit at times I really choose to be or whatever. It really is about the synergy that you're having with your life experiences. And so all that is to say, I find that success for me, it has, there's very real things that I do want. There's very real, legitimate, material things that I do want to accomplish. But I'm learning that the path in achieving them is full of extraordinary mystery and surprise. And if I'm open to that, then I'm even more successful. So that's my take.
I think I don't think people are trained enough to sort of design their own lives and ideas of success, personalized success.
That's a very interesting point.
You're talking about your students who want what you have, right? When I was a kid, I wanted to be a rock star, right? That's just the what was being forced, media-wise or image-wise or MTV-wise, whatever it was. That was what I saw. When I finally had the opportunity, I hated it. I didn't like the lifestyle. I felt shitty all the time. My relationships sucked. I was only living at night. I was never at home. My friendships were suffering. And I was like, I don't want that at all. And
Myself too. That's interesting that you said that.
And then there was a moment where I was like, okay, I guess I actually have to figure out what I want. And then it was like, okay, I need a certain amount of family time and a certain amount of money and a certain amount of personal projects that maybe will make money and hopefully will, but you never know. But I think everybody's different. And that would be a great class in a curriculum. Like, deal with yourself. Forget all the noise,
I may steal that from my USC class. I want to make sure that we open up and have. I'm going to ask maybe one more question before we get to question and answer, because we want to make sure everybody gets their questions in. But that was a great segue. I was sort of making this point that when I'm turning 40 in February. I know I look like I'm 17, but I'm turning 40, right? And when I was a child, there were very distinct rules about a musician. It was like, okay, if you sell 500,000, you're a gold artist, your status is this. If you sell 1 million, you're platinum, your status is this. And now there aren't those rules anymore. Being that the music business, the movie business, everything has changed, being that we're living in a completely different world. So as someone in the audience that's starting out now trying to make film, what is different about the way that we live now, or should I say, what is the advice? Because some of the biggest questions that I get from my engineering students and people that are getting into film is, how do I know if this independent film is legitimate? How do I know if I should really go through the road that we all know of what independent film is, where you're sometimes sacrificing monetary things for this idea of, I'm going to make this great piece of art? How do you gauge, or should I say, how do you even filter who you will work for or what projects you'll take on? And I just want to have everyone answer that before we open up for questions, because I think it's important for the people in the audience now who are living in this time, who didn't necessarily come through the same steps that everyone else went through.
Wow. You pose good and tough questions. Big questions.
I mean, that's sort of the core of what I get is sort of, we're not living in that time of greatly defined things. If we take film from years ago, it was greatly defined as to where you needed to go, what places, who you needed to talk to. And now I see, some really great films and some okay films, but, I may run across an NYU student who just blows me away, and it's like, okay, well, how should I converse with everyone to let them know that this is something of quality? Or how do you sort of pick the projects that you work with?
I mean, I think anything, both for your own work and other people's work, having what my teacher used to call like a bullshit detector is critical. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
It's just an ongoing thing that's super hard, but it's like I feel like your nose starts to get tuned in, and you can kind of be like, okay, this feels legit, or it doesn't. And sometimes you're not always right. But that's the hardest part, I think. Okay. I mean, it's like sometimes I'll score things and I'll be like, I don't get it. And then I'll even go to the festival and I'll be like, I don't get it. And then suddenly I'll sit there at the premiere and I'll be like, I'm really glad that somewhere deep inside I was dumb enough to I oversaw, went through that and did it, because now I'm so proud of it. And it's really tough. For as many times that I've chosen right, it's always a little bit of a toss of the dice, I think.
I think it's like a weird and exciting time of reinvention, where I know the conversations I've been having with filmmakers and writers and editors are completely uncharted.
Right.
I had a meeting yesterday with with two guys, and we were talking about forming some kind of collective to make a project that would be narrative but music driven, whereas usually the music is serving a pre-existing narrative, but where we would start with the music, the visuals, the film, let's call it, would serve the music, and then it would be like a multi-platform, essentially a game, some new kind of game that's a narrative music film, right?
Wow.
So, but that's that's the time we're living in, where it's like
right.
5 years ago, 10 years ago, people would have been like, dude, don't do that. Just like get a job.
Right.
But now it's like, guess what? Nobody has a job. Let's do this.
Right.
I think the
Right.
technology has made everything so accessible to everybody to try different creative ways of expressing. And I think that is fantastic in many ways. I mean, at times it's a little intrusive, but it's fantastic.
I mean, it's awesome for me in terms of when I sit there and I can be like, you know, I can in one file on my computer be scoring something that's got like, you know, a hang drum of which there's like 50 in the world, and
Right.
then like close that and open something else up, and it's like a band-driven indie rock thing for a commercial, and then like just being, or like open up Ableton and be like, all right, I'm gonna sample like something that I've like recorded on my cell phone and then work that into a score, and just the ability, like, I mean, I can say without a doubt I would be not a film composer if I didn't live in a time where I could have sampled cellos and have sampled violins on my computer and be able to do that for a relatively inexpensive amount of money, you know?
Right.
And that's, I mean, it's something that seems so assumed now where you're like, oh, great, yeah, let me just open that up and I'll get LA scoring strings loaded up, you know? But I mean, that's a huge, huge deal, I think.
Absolutely. Do we? We have. Can we? Do we have a microphone to go around here? Let me also piggyback that point. And this is something that I bring up all the time in music when I'm creating. I say, you know, it's a great world when I used to fight against. I hate record labels, right? I hate them absolutely. And it's a great world that we live in that I don't need a record label anymore, and that all the power and the access has been given. But it's also sort of a negative that all the power and the access has been given, because now I have to sit through a bunch of guys who like bought equipment last week and they think that they're a producer. So, you know, do you find that as well as like because the LA scoring strings are in everyone's computer that some guy thinks he's now, you know, qualified to do the same thing that you do? Or woman, I don't want to be sexist. This was a segue to get the microphone out there.
Yeah, I still think that there's always that intangible thing.
Okay.
I mean, that's what you always have, like when you're laying in bed at night, you're like, how am I going to get more work this year? How am I going to continue to work? You know, and that's what I mean in terms of most ad agencies or most, you know, film companies or whatever are choosing between a music house or, you know, some like crazy composer who's got like 12 kids who work underneath him and churn out scores all day long, or you. So you just gotta feel assured that your unique voice is gonna continue to be that thing and just do it. And that'll continue to exist even if you are using LA scoring strings.
I mean, barring any kind of working business model, what else do we have but a sort of sense of, I think this is right, still feels right, I'm just gonna keep doing it. We're not starving.
You have to have your own authentic, you know, vibe with stuff, and you have to have that authenticity and let that really invest in that, and really like you were saying, let that guide you. I mean, that's kind of what people are gravitating towards when they hire you, is your thing. So, and again, too, relationships. That's really important.
Great. Do we have some questions?
Yeah, anyone has a question, let me know. We have about time for 2 questions. Young Guru is going to play a set afterwards. Want to give you your
You can
proper
shorten
time.
my set for questions.
So, questions?
This
Anybody
is the
have
reason
questions?
why we're here is the questions.
Anybody's got questions? The 4 of them up there, ready, willing, and able. Anybody?
Any questions?
I mean, I feel like sometimes commercials can feel like animation or something, you know, that you have to find a different way to lead you through it. I started talking like I thought I might have an interesting answer to this question. I don't. They just weren't saying it.
Well, are there situations, because a lot of times I look at what's done. I'm a very big anime person, so I look at the world of anime, and there's a lot of things that are done that can't be done in the real world. Does that bring in in your work, any type of situation that may be different than actual real world?
The main thing that scares me the most about it is it's just a world of really strict picture lock. So you're dealing in you've really got to hit these moments and you've got to hit them right on the nose. And also, it's easier, like you were saying, it's easier to empathize and instantly click into a world that has human beings in it. So it takes a little bit more innovation that way, I guess.
I like that with traditional or old animation like Warner Brothers, Carl Stalling, that you don't quite have to be so mature and subtle about it. You can really go with the picture, and it can actually enhance everything that the animation's trying to do. It's a cartoon. I guess the scoring term they use is Mickey Mousing something, where you go exactly with the action and everything goes with it. It's great. It's so fun because nobody ever lets you do it. So to have permission to do something ridiculous like that is a dream. The movie that I'm here with, which is called They Came Together, is it's a rom-com parody. And so everything that I'm often restraining, all of my worst, cheesiest, schmaltziest, gooeyest instincts, we're just like, no, do more of that, more harps, more strings, more higher, bigger orchestra. I was like, okay. So it's kind of like
moments when people are like, when they encourage you to do it, and then something you're like, I don't want it. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah, you're like, no,
do more of that.
Right.
It's weird.
And so in a way, it was. There were times where I felt like I was scoring an animated picture, and it was great. It's like everything's an antidote to everything else. You have to do like a minimalist, like restrained, like one, just a musical Saw score. And then it's like, okay, slather it on. This is a rom-com. It's fun.
Great. Do we have any other questions?
And this is for each one of the panelists. Is there a project that each of you worked on that you felt the most proud of? Not that it was, the biggest name or it paid the most money, but is it something that you did, whether it's big or small, independent or studio, that just stepped back and said, man, I'm really proud of this. This is something I want to, keep showing over and over, like people come over and watch home videos.
Good question.
This is an easy one for me because I was here last year with a movie for HBO called Life According to Sam, about a young guy who's 13 years old suffering from a degenerative aging. It's essentially the average age of people who suffer from this disease is 13 years old. And I followed him and his mom, who's the only doctor kind of pioneering the treatment for that thing. And Sam passed away like 4 days ago at 18. And so much of our jobs is to underscore and bring emotional resonance to narrative films, and it's like a lot of it is like some single white guy in Hollywood wrote this romantic comedy, and we score that, and it's all fake, and you're like, it's great, this is fun, we get to make fantasy, and to sit in the theater with all of the families who were involved in the documentary and having Sam be part of this thing, it was a totally transcendent experience for me as a composer. I mean, emotionally affecting, because you realize that you're not messing around anymore. I was bringing resonance to real people's lives, and it was something that the other day, just sitting on the phone with my wife, we were away on tour, and I was just sitting there with her, kind of quietly being like, that was something that I'm not going to replace in terms of a chance to score a film.
I mean, that's a hard question because I don't really have a favorite. I mean, each of the projects I've worked on has had something about it that really resonated with me and really just made me feel excited. I would say it's not so much that these are my favorite, but what comes to mind is when I worked with Ava DuVernay on Middle of Nowhere, which was premiered here in 2012. And the way she told that story from such a different vantage point of just storytelling of African American life, but not necessarily as the point of reference. I mean, it was just a nice way of being effective in narrative storytelling, and I really appreciated being a part of that. And then right now I'm working with a documentary with Sam Pollard about August Wilson for PBS, for American Masters. And August Wilson has a very special place in my heart because I got to work with him personally on Gym of the Ocean and Radio Golf. So I'm very invested. Just the way that film resonates with me is very strong. But that's a really hard question. I mean, I never like to do favorites or the one and only. I never like to do hierarchy or, I mean, it's just a flow. I mean, it's all taking me into a place of gratitude and I don't want to sound all airy-fairy, but really, just the fact that I'm getting paid to write some music is still, I'm just like blown, I'm like, really? I'm being paid to write music, wow. It's really cool. And so I think that's the other thing I wanted to say to people who are just starting out. I use this term a lot, which is demystify. I think you have to really try to demystify the process and don't overthink everything. And really, if you like writing music, like before I even started composing, I just would say I'm a composer. I just would say it because that's what I was feeling about myself. I didn't have any projects. I wasn't doing anything, but just really find out those things that make you happy and just begin to include them in your life, and things will begin to reflect that. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
For me, 3 movies come to mind. School of Rock, which has very little to do with me. There's not a ton of score in it. Although I like the work I did on it. I just love the movie, and every year that I see it, whenever it comes on TV, I watch the entire thing, and I just feel so blessed to have been a part of that project. Also, the movie Wet Hot American Summer, partly because it's Wet Hot American Summer, and it's one of the funniest movies ever, and because it was the first time that all of my best friends and I got to like make something together. And it was very collaborative and very much like the subject matter. It was like being at creative summer camp with my best friends and getting paid a little bit of money for it. But just personally, score-wise, I think the score that did everything that I wanted it to do, even though it's a small, subtle score, is the movie Laurel Canyon. Whenever I hear the music for it or see the movie, I'm like, yeah, that still sounds good to me. It doesn't feel dated. It still evokes the emotions and the drama that I was going for, but half the time you don't know. You think you're doing it right, you're trying to do it right, maybe it's right, and then 10 years later or whatever, it's like, oh, well, that's all right. You did a good job on that.
I do have to add that the movie that I'm currently here for, Dear White People, I'm extremely excited about because the director has included this pastiche of music it's classical, it's symphonic, it's jazz, it's hip hop, it's got everything in it that I love. So for a composer to have the ability to write with that broad range of genre has been extraordinary for me. So please see this movie, support it, and thank you.
Wow. Give them a hand, guys. That's it. We don't have time for any more questions. Okay, that's great. Again, we want to thank YouTube. We want to thank everybody that made this possible. Please give them another round of applause for coming out and sharing their experience with you. And before we wrap up, I guess I'm going to do a set while you guys have fun at the bar. And if somebody could bring me a drink, that would be great. Thank you guys again for coming out.